I headed a COVID-18 crisis. Well, there could have been a COVID-18. I found an interesting little fact the other day that quite a few people think that COVID-19 is because it's COVID 2019, but actually it doesn't have anything to do with the year. It's the 19th coronavirus that they've known. There is an 18th coronavirus, but it was not very very serious then. So this is the 19th one. Hopefully we won't be doing this for COVID-20. Yeah, that's my hope. Well, I think that we are now 1 minute away from starting, so we're going to start here. And we have our moderators, so I think let's get going. And so again, I would like to say welcome to everyone that's joining us. We have 40 people, probably from about 20 different countries, online here right now. It's as Worlddidac is always a small UN of people and educators and CEOs from around the world. And this was to be a cozy small group for this webinar because we're getting into this. This is the second webinars. The next series that we do very much probably will be larger and more public than as we master this technology. So again, I'd like everyone to mute their microphones and so that we can pay attention to the moderators, and also leave your video off. Only the panelists should have their videos on, and they are also free to turn them off if they wish, except when, of course, when they're presenting, that has to be on. So I would like to tell everybody again that this session will be recorded and go on YouTube. So just keep that in mind. No bad behavior, please. So I don't think it'll happen anyway. As I mentioned, this webinar was originally scheduled for 1 hour, but we will go a little bit longer to allow a Q&A session, and that could be maybe another 20 minutes or so on here. So today we have a fantastic group of panelists, I have to say. We have Brajes Pant, who's the Chief Education Sector Group at the Asian Development Bank in Manila, Philippines. He is currently in Kathmandu right now. He is originally from Nepal, and he is a gentleman with an enormous amount of experience and a very wide viewpoint from where he is. And we also have Lisa Marie Krebich from also the ADB. She's in Germany right now. We have Dr. Shyamal Majumdar, who is the former head of Unesco Univoc, very important agency in technical and vocational education. I've known Shyamal for many years also. And he is now back in India with the International Center for Vocational. Well, he's continuing his good work there. He will speak about that then. And we have Mr. Raul Valdez Cotera, if I had that pronounced correctly. But I'm sure if I haven't, he'll correct me. He's the team leader at UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning. And this is a very, very, very interesting organization. And lifelong learning is one of my favorite topics, and it's something that if we could just I've always held that teachers need to start practicing themselves if they want to actually get the students to practice it. It's something that is not, you can tell somebody you have to do it. And I believe in lifelong learning. I think many of us here, the reason that we're on this webinar is probably all of us are lifelong learners. And that's a way to stay young at heart and to keep engaged. Okay, so we have probably people joining us from the list. Probably 30 to 40 countries will be joining us today. And this session is for our affiliates, our members, our associates. So welcome to everyone in the second series for Worlddidac. We have so many students out of school. According to Unesco, 1.5 billion students all over the world. There's maybe 90% at one point or another have been out of school around the world. And never have we ever had this type of situation that we've been facing globally, not even in the biggest wars that we've had in the recent history. You know, most countries were unprepared for such disruptive learning. never, it was very unforeseen. However, the tools that people are turning to have been there and being developed as well. And we'll come back to that. But this huge impact that we're facing is not just loss of learning, loss of time. I mean, some countries are going to be obviously hit harder than others. We're going to have issues of students not being able to complete their learning and their certification. Are some people going to be set back a year, a half a year, a quarter? Whatever amount it is, there's to make up that learning is a real issue and a real cost concerned with it. So it's an economic hardship, and it's also time lost. People have to spend extra time in school, or they have to do their remedial makeup work during the holidays over the next few periods. How countries will deal with this will be interesting. We're also facing loss of jobs in many places. Every day I read articles about people are worried that jobs may not be coming back. And this is not just in developing countries, but it's also in developed countries. The US has more people out of work than at any time since we recorded data. About this. This is even worse than the Great Depression in the US in terms of the amount of unemployment as a percentage of population. Our unemployment rate has hit 20% in the US, and in other countries, it's devastating, particularly to the tourism sector, the airlines, the hotels, which many developed countries rely upon as a major source here. So we're going to have masses of unemployed people. This again is a job for education on this, to take care of the disadvantaged, the vulnerable. How do we do retraining? Are we going to position ourselves to do retraining? So even developed countries are struggling with this, but the developing countries are less prepared. In recent times, digital and online learning has been very slow to gain acceptance. I've worked on a number of projects over the last decade or so, and we've seen a lot of people struggling with implementing various forms of digital learning. And this could be everything from one-to-one, which we've had fascinating conversations about how to do that better, one-to-one learning, one device, one child, which that started about 10 years ago, a decade ago, and Intel was very involved in that, for example, and there's a lot of issues. And I'll mention this right up front. Teacher training was a very important part that was left out early in the one-to-one movement that had to be put in strongly in later implementations of that in order to make it work. And I think we're going to be talking about that again today. So this crisis is stimulating a lot of serious discussion about the inclusion of digital learning into education as an essential feature, possibly now, is what I hope. And if we can create something positive from this crisis and use the opportunity to move education and industry towards digital learning, that would be a good thing that comes out of this. So our panelist today, as I mentioned, is Brajesh Pant from the Asian Development Bank, who oversees many policies and projects in the education sector for the Asian Development Bank, and has a wealth of experience in facing all kinds of development issues. Lisa Marie, also his colleague from the ADB, will be joining us. Dr. Shamal Majumdar, the former head of Unesco and UNIVOC, which is one of the major innovative centers in vocational training under Unesco, and Raul Valdez-Cotera, the team leader at Unesco Institute for Lifelong Learning. So I'd like to say just a few words before we go to Brajesh at the ADB and Lisa about, keeping in mind, when we start talking about digital online learning, there's a lot of it gets very confusing very quickly because people have different points of view. It's like a big elephant in a dark room, that old joke, whereas you have 10 people in a dark room with a big elephant, everybody feels a different part of it. I got the tail, I got the nose, and you compare what you're feeling, and it's all completely different. And so, by looking at it from various points of view, I think student access, learning platforms, content, teacher skills, policy and leadership, and then if you're going to transform, these are all important topics that help you kind of categorize and fit things together, because this is a puzzle that we're doing. It's complex and it is integrated. I believe you have to have a holistic viewpoint at this to make this work. And I believe we have to actually change the structures in education in order to make it the most effective way. And that's from teacher preparation to curriculum, maybe even school planning too as well. But certainly it also influences what you have in the schools and what you're doing with it. And this is one of the models that I keep coming back to, that I had the pleasure of working on together with Ict and some of my colleagues, particularly from Malaysia, from the University of Tung Hussein On. We kind of developed the structure in looking at what we were actually originally looking at, why educational projects struggled, or technology projects struggled to achieve good success. Often we were achieving a not optimal success, as we might say in education policy speak, which means failure. And there's reasons for that. I mean, there's been huge failures, like tablet project in Thailand that tried to launch one tablet for every child, and that got rescinded after about 500,000 to 750,000 devices being put out in the student hands. We've had the digital broadband, the program in Malaysia that also did poorly because after a couple years, and particularly they had a virtual learning platform, only about 1% of the teachers using it. But now they wish they did it, at this point. They're all over the world, even the first one-to-one major project in Portugal has really, look at what happened there. And they actually had also major failures, but they corrected it also. So, but looking at these things, we have infrastructure, infostructure, and infoculture. And infrastructure is all the networking, the tools. This will be your computers, your broadband, your network systems. And this is what often, projects concentrate on that. Let's put computers in, let's put something to have a label on it, and let's inventory it. But digital learning is ephemeral. It's hard to count the assets. That's one of the problems it is. And we get into the infrastructure. That's the platforms, the software, and the digital content. This is very important. If you do not have this properly done, the infrastructure is useless. And the third area, which I think is the most important, is the infoculture. And that is the ability of the teachers and the students to use the previous two together effectively for teaching and learning. And that calls for different policies. It calls for your educational technology integrated into your curriculum. It calls for teacher training and support. This calls for also how you're going to use that content in your curriculum. This is the most important element of this. In fact, if you had to choose one, only do one, you could do this and still be more effective than doing either of these three or these two without doing this. And so these percentages here might be a guideline where you put your efforts or where you put your investment into ensuring that you get a balanced thing. Still, most of it goes into infrastructure, but these three together make a whole list of this. Another one I'd like to share with you from the Florida Center for Instructional Technology at the University of South Florida in the US. They're the number 6 research university in the US, and I know them quite well. They have a wonderful model for looking at how you integrate technology into teaching and learning. And I think this is very useful because we talk about a lot of these things. We talk about Zoom, we talk about MOOCs, we talk about LMS, we talk about game-based content, and they're not all the same. And not everybody can do the same thing either as well. So if you're a teacher in Bangladesh, you probably are not going to go up to this level. You got to start with where you are, with what you have, and to progress, with what you can do. And this kind of provides a framework. And I threw some titles up here on this. This is my doing, so if you don't agree with it, you can blame me. And this is not definitive by any means, but I just wanted to show you that they appear in different places here. For like MOOCs, this is really not, we're not doing something that we didn't really do before. This is just kind of transferring what we did a little bit online. Zoom is much the same way. When we use Zoom, we're holding classes online, but they're still classes, and you're still teacher-led, and they still pretty much follow what happened in the classroom. So entry level doesn't actually transform learning. You're just using new technology to do the same thing you did before, but in a little bit different way. And then you go to adoption level. Adoption level is where you're taking that technology, now you're starting to move it a little bit more. And you're probably getting it more effective. Adaptation is where things really start to come into their own when you adapt them to do better teaching and learning, at this point. And then we go into fusion, and fusion is where you'll find educational technology embedded into most aspects of what you're doing teaching and learning. And the third area is transformation. And that's where you're doing things here that you could not previously imagine here at the earlier levels. And this is where we want to go towards that level. With Rajesh, I had very interesting conversation the other day about AI. And AI is a wonderful tool that holds promise to finally do adaptive learning. If we can have non-linear learning content, or content that allows multiple learning pathways, and then use AI to access that and get people learning in different ways that matches their needs. This is a dream of many educators and what a good educator wants to do, but it's hard when you have large classes to do this. It's even harder to do it when you're online with even more students, So as we go up here, these will become transformative, and this will be collaborative. So this is a good framework to do this. You can Google this, Florida Center for Instructional Technology, TIMS, and learn more about this. And this will be, I'm sure you'll all benefit. Okay, so now to our panelists. So we're going to start our session from this. What we're going to do is we're going to have a couple of rounds here, and each of our panelists will share their opinions and share their views with you, and then we will do a round there with them, and then we'll come back for a short one of them sharing their ideas with us of what they think educational change will mean. And so we'll have a further discussion about this, and then we'll get to the Q&A session here. So I'd like to kick this off, and please welcome Brajesh Pant, and Sarah, if you can turn over the moderation to Brajesh, please. Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, good evening. I don't know where you are. You're apparently from 40 countries, over 40 countries. So it's a pleasure, Steve, to come to this webinar. And you have already touched on some very important areas. So in terms of major challenge for developing countries, all of us know that many countries are already facing a learning crisis. What that means is, if we look at World Bank's learning poverty, over 50% of children at the age of 10 cannot read simple stories. And this is a major challenge. Now, on top of that, when schools are closed, you can imagine the deficit that will start accumulating. It is very important to minimize that. Hence, what we're seeing now is, as you mentioned, over 180 countries have had to shut down the education facilities that have affected over 1.6 billion children and students, leading to a major concern about when these institutions can open up. And given that there may be waves coming, after that, after the first round, the uncertainty continues to linger. In terms of what we are seeing is many countries now, our member countries, what we call developing member countries, are scrambling to provide online support. Now, online support is challenging because the connectivity is a problem, and it's not only about online learning because of connectivity, but also using television and radio to complement, and there are some good examples of that. So we are also being approached by several countries to support them in this process. But there are many challenges. Many developing countries are not ready for online learning due to various reasons. Appropriate government policies and coordination are not in place for such a scale of online learning. I mean, partially over a period it's possible, but now we are seeing the need to do that urgently. Digital infrastructure is limited, including low connectivity, inadequate access to devices, and lack of digital contents. Teachers lack digital and pedagogical skills to manage online learning. Students, and particularly parents, are not ready with online learning approaches. And there are too many global providers but inadequate comprehensive solutions at the country level that align with specific contexts. Despite the challenges, there is a huge upsurge in online learning, and for the first time, governments are actively pursuing online learning in public education at an unprecedented scale. So here comes the opportunity also. So what is ADB doing? ADB is looking at 3 areas of support, discussing with interested governments and relevant stakeholders to bring EdTech solutions to support remote distance learning for school level education, K-12, what we call kindergarten through 12 grades. Second, identifying effective ways of improving workforce development by focusing on repurposing workers from low to high demand occupations and sectors, such as we know health, e-commerce, logistics, and targeting vulnerable groups such as garment workers, migrant workers, informal sector workers, etc. And third, drawing lessons and best practices on remote learning and identifying potential partners that can bring innovative solutions. These areas provide good entry points to align with medium and longer-term priorities. So we've always strived to look at longer-term goal of improving learning outcomes and employment outcomes. Now is the time to see how we can retrofit and then also look at how we can use these opportunities as entry points. So ADB approach includes 5 key pillars of country's digital learning ecosystem, which you already pointed out, Steve. So government policies and financing to enable and ensure continued learning. Without that, it will be very ad hoc, it will be uncoordinated, so we need to ensure that. Digital infrastructure, as I mentioned, network, devices, digital contents to ensure equitable access. Teachers and schools. Teacher readiness is very important. Without that, how do you manage the learning process? And then that is going to be a big challenge. And home environment support for students, and parents are also at home. So we were talking the other day about work-life balance. That's very important. Then private education, private EdTech providers. There are many, but some are really good. And these providers can partner with local providers to provide different options. We had a webinar recently with Coursera, and it's mind-boggling, the statistics. 80,000 universities around the world are using their program, and they provide free education up to 5,000 students per university. So that's the magnitude of scale we are talking about. So some of the elements that ADB can support include government policy coordination, in looking at measurable set of indicators to show how online learning complements overall learning and contributes to improved teaching and employability of graduates over time. There should also be a clear policy on the 5 pillars that I just mentioned. Then second, ICT infrastructure. We have to look at multiple channels of delivery, as I mentioned earlier. It's not just computer-based learning, but also television, radio. It may be also looking at 4 different scenarios: high-tech, medium-tech, low-tech, and maybe no-tech. With a new generation of technologies available, high-tech levels typically result in better learning outcomes for students, but it takes time for the country or remote regions to upgrade the home infrastructure. Hence, it's common to see the government organizing resources to support each of the 4 channels at the same time. The next one, learning resources. Depending on the infrastructure levels, the government can define and transform the existing curriculum at the national and regional level to the appropriate format of the corresponding method of teaching. That is also using different devices and modalities, TV, radio, online learning. There are also open educational resources, and like Khan Academy, excellent resources, code.org for digital literacy. So these are fantastic resources, and we keep on coming across platforms like Google Classroom, which is also free to use they are also improving that technology quite a lot. Next one is platform selection. there are so many platforms available, but there needs to be some guidance, some criteria to select. And the idea is to have an integrated solution that interfaces with different possibilities. And that, I think, is very important in our discussion. Teacher professional development. This was already an issue even before. So now it becomes even more important. But the advantage is we look at it from different perspective to recharge the whole thing. And then digital literacy is the center of this whole thing. And there are books, as Steve mentioned earlier, Coursera, Udemy, Udacity, edX. They are providing some really good complementary areas. Indonesia, you might want to check out, is one of the few countries we have seen which is now using online learning for higher education. Students can gain credits up to 50%. And this ecosystem is now being developed. So that's the level of response that some governments are looking at. And you all know the Minister of Education in Indonesia is now the former founder, CEO of Gojek. So it's not surprising. Finally, public-private partnership is key because innovation is there. And that innovation requires a lot of entrepreneurial ventures. And this becomes very important. So I'll stop there and I'll ask my colleague Lisa to complement. Lisa?
Everyone, thank you, Brajesh. Thanks a lot for having me on this webinar today. I just want to illustrate what Brajesh said, and I would like to present a specific example of ADB support to the education sector in Uzbekistan. So in Uzbekistan, schools have been closed from 15th of March, and since then, the Ministry of Public Education has been mobilizing resources to continue teaching and learning. They've been mobilizing resource persons, such as outstanding teachers and also state award winners, to prepare video lessons, which are now being broadcasted on TV and also on the internet. So ADB is now looking at supporting this initiative in the short term, but also then looking at more medium and long-term options. So for the emergency response during the current epidemic, we are providing recommendations on how to improve the existing distance learning tutorials, how to improve the quality, and how to bring them to more channels. So this includes internet, mobile phones, TV, also the radio, to reach as many people as possible. We are also providing recommendations on how to develop the content portal to allow all teachers and all learners to access the learning materials. Improving the learning management systems is also another option that captures then all activities of teachers and students. We help to create effective assessment systems for conducting online examinations, and we are also establishing teacher digital literacy training so that the teachers are fully prepared to use the existing systems and the content to teach effectively. But then after this short-term response during the epidemic, we also look at the school reopening phase. It is estimated to start in June, and there we plan to support the implementation of a health tracking system at schools, and also the roadmap planning for a long-term online learning strategy for the government of Uzbekistan. This will then also include investments in ICT infrastructure, so network and devices in households, but also in schools. And we will continue providing support to curriculum design, to the teacher training, and also improve the content design. And this will then serve as a small-scale pilot, so to say, and we will use this pilot to conduct evidence-based assessment to see how those solutions impact learning outcomes. Based on this evaluation, we will then plan a bigger scale rollout of education technology solutions, even beyond September 2020, following a roadmap for the whole country. So this is an example how we support our developing member countries in overcoming the current school closure. But I would also like to highlight another aspect. This is digital solutions for workforce development, because we are also supporting countries to mitigate job market disruptions, and we are helping to ensure that TVET delivery can be adapted to the changing conditions. And here we are looking at various aspects, such as digital short-term training and retraining, so that during the pandemic, the workforce can move from the rather low demand to the high demand sectors. This is especially important for jobs in the medical field, but also for other sectors. For example, moving people from restaurants to supermarkets, or from manufacturing to e-commerce or logistics. We are also looking at how digital training can improve occupational safety and health, particularly for those workers who are now in essential services, such as the medical field, but also in supply chains for food processing, logistics, transport, so that they can learn how to protect themselves and also others. And another aspect I would like to highlight is the role of public employment service centers. So government could use these service centers to promote reskilling and upskilling of people, including skills related to digital, financial literacy, 21st century skills. And this could also be an option to include the most vulnerable groups, like migrant workers or informal sector workers. That's all from our side. Back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Lisa. That was really interesting. Thanks for sharing those specific projects too, as well. And so now I'd like to invite Dr. Shamal to share his thoughts and words of wisdom on these topics for us. Please, Dr. Shamal. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve, for having me. I'm from now in Kolkata, India, in a little bit difficult situation in a sense of internet connectivity. So please pardon me in between if the net connection becomes slow. So first of all, I'd like to thank the doctor for organizing such a webinar in a very important time on an important topic. I think we all agree in one issue. We are facing an unprecedented crisis. This is a health crisis. This is a learning crisis. This is an economic crisis. It is an all-pervasive crisis. Nobody knows how we will come out from it. Perhaps, to me, this is the biggest crisis that is in the 21st century. All organizations, including government, conventional government, local governments, all are deploying strategies and approaches that we have never seen. Surely, under these circumstances, vocational education, technical vocational education, in particular, cannot be a silent spectator. I was amazed to see so many TVET organizations which I'm connected with are responding to the situation after initial shock and suddenness of the situation. Nobody was prepared for such situation. Largely, all the responses was delayed and varied in nature. I categorize this response into two sections. One, immediate, which I say in the immediate is there are three key questions we have faced. Number one, you all said how to mitigate ongoing interruption of learning due to the closure of face-to-face school, which Unesco has rightly pointed out. In fact, in parallel, there was a webinar going on, which I have participated. 1.5 billion is out of school. How to combat this? When you look to the situation, there are three scenarios. Okay, there is a no-tech, there is a low-tech, there is a high-tech. When we talk about the no-tech, means somebody has pushed you on a water and you don't know how to swim it, but you have to survive. So it is a desperate situation. We are putting our all resources, try to just float because we have to survive. So this is the worst scenario in my opinion. And what is the technology I am looking around is the broadcast TV with telephone and printed material. There is no no technology, we can call it digital technology being used. The situation is little better in the low-tech countries where they are using WhatsApp, they are using conference tool little bit, but still I will say it is low-tech because it is not learning management system, it is not engaging, it is not adaptable, it is not empowering the learner. It is more of a first level of the digital use. Those who are in a high-tech countries, they are fortunate. They are all ready and they are responding to the situation. So definitely we need to really address that one size doesn't fit all. I was looking at the statistics. Do you know that in a home, how many countries, percentage-wise, the average is 50% of the household in the world do not have any computers. 48% has no internet connectivity. This is the world statistics. When it comes to Africa, I was noting down the figure is almost reaching 89% and 82%. So definitely, I think this is a big, big challenge for all of us, including you. I am meaning all the companies, private companies, technical service providers. I think we have to leapfrog. If you go by only stereotype, step-by-step way to address this problem, we will never reach this goal, and we have to come up with some innovative ideas. When we talk about the distance learning, largely we talk distance learning in terms of access only. But where it didn't, Steve, you have rightly said that even if it's a very low acceptance to many institutions, because we didn't address the quality aspect and relevant aspect of it. So for us, the biggest challenge is how all multi-stakeholder can work. And you know that World Alliance has come in, which need to address this connectivity issue, hardware issue. We need to have a teachers development, which I will deal in the second questions. The second issue is not directly regarding the closure, but more to the response of huge shortage of protective gear, mask, sanitizer, ventilators, protective gears. I'm in India and I'm in a very highly infected area, and we are passing through a very critical time. We had a meeting with all vet institutions that let's in what way or others try to come up with some kind of innovative ways we can. Number one was the testing. Testing methods taking too much time, and this is not possible for a developing country. You will be happy to know that some of the vet institution has come up with a testing kit. Some has come with the multiple low-cost ventilator to serve not only one patient, 8 patients together. Some has come up with the sanitizer, organic sanitizer. This is a really called productive school concept has come in, and which will be really give a strength of community response and also the labor market response. The third issue which has come is how to organize awareness program to fight pandemic. This awareness program has gone not only from the point of view of just a campaign, but also to show them the way of hygiene, to come up with some kind of meal and community kitchen. There are a lot happening in this area. All in all, my suggestion is that you do not have, that's why in a country you cannot give just straightforward the solution. You have to go deep dive and see what real context of the situation. When it got on the productive years, some of the vocational school has 3D printers. They came up with a very good solution, but largely it is unthinkable. Most vet schools do not have that facility. There was a low-level fab lab technique being used, whereas digital and is coming. So I like to give you a understanding now that when you really address the learning crisis, please broaden the concept. Learning crisis is not just replicate the learning. This is a very crisis moment, unprecedented moment, where we need more innovation, and digital tools can be helpful to rescue people and their life and livelihood. That's why I like to hammer this point in a much more trust way. Finally, in long run, the key questions is coming up, because when the post-pandemic situation, one thing we have to prepare ourselves, online education in effective ways. I will come to that question in my second deliberation, how we can prepare, like you can have an immediate response, midterm response, and long-term response, and how a developed country can help a developing country, how we can make a partnership among them. Second critical issue will be how we can skill and reskill migrant workers and integrate with the local market. Unthinkable, domestic migration that has been taken place in India, and just referring because I'm now in India, you can see that the people are coming back to their rural villages, and these people are skill asset. But now there is no solution, because if you don't come up with skilling and reskilling and continuous, and VET school has to take that responsibility. VET cannot be for initial education, VET for the long-term, continuous education that we need to come. We have to come up with multi-level vocational program. How to prepare TVET for public health management system? We have never thought of. Now it's a time, because we have to trace, we have to do pandemic situation, how another pandemic will come, how TVET will respond to that. How to prepare community-based solution in energy, renewable energy, water, sanitation, agricultural sector. And finally, how we can prepare TVET for sustainable development, not just economic, but social and environment. One thing is very clear, the way we have led our life has reached this crisis. If we repeat that mistake, the world will have much more pandemic in future. We need knowledge skill for biodiversity, for peace, for global citizenship. We need new learners. We need reposition TVET for a new future. I like to stop it here. When the other question will come, I will deal that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shamal. That was very insightful, with your experience and your viewpoint. And thank you for mentioning Indonesia, which is surprisingly nimble when it's in moving into online learning. But I think by nature, the country being the world's largest archipelago, it really makes sense logistically for them. But all of us need to move in this direction. So thank you for that. Look forward to your second comments. So Raul, if you could share with us your insights, particularly from your viewpoint at lifelong learning, and are we actually going to achieve lifelong learning in the near future? Thank you.
Thank you for the invitation to Worlddidac to present today. My name is Raul Valdez, and I will start sharing some of the key points. Of course, my predecessors already raised very interesting points. And it's true that the COVID-19 has changed our lives, the life of billions of people around the world within weeks. It has rapidly transformed daily routines, work environment, social life, and the way of billions of students around the world. In addition to being, as Shamal mentioned, a global health crisis, the COVID-19 outbreaks, it's a major economic, education, and labor crisis. And we can see economically that there is already a drop in consumption in numerous sectors, such as tourism, services, agriculture, production, and even cultural and leisure sectors, which increase unemployment and widens the social inequalities observed prior to the pandemic. Well, in the case of education sector, you also mentioned that. In fact, yesterday, the chart is showing 72% of the world's student population, that's 1.3 billion children and youth, is affected by schools closures in more than 175 countries. As these schools close, students, of course, miss out on opportunities to learn. And what we can already see is that more vulnerable students may not return to the education system. Higher education institutions all around the world also have been affected and forced to close their premises and stop on-campus learning, which affects traditional students' population, but also the lifelong learning activities of these institutions, including flexible learning formats such as short cycle courses, open lectures, public talks, etc., offered to international and local communities and learners of all ages. What's the impact in these school closures? This may translate to reduced learning outcomes and lower long-term earning trajectories for learners and their families, and of course reduce overall for the economies of the countries in which they work and live. In addition, concern is the suspension of schools' feeding programs, which may also negatively affect children's food consumption and the nutritional status. We know today that these closures are placing unprecedented challenges on governments of 4 levels to ensure the continuity of learning. But also it's challenging a lot of learners, parents, teachers, caregivers that not necessarily know how to react to this pandemic. We also know that the COVID-19 has exacerbated already existing inequalities. Those who have little education support at home are in danger of being left behind by a lack of technology and guidance, including vulnerable population. I'm talking about children and youth at risk, digitally excluded population, people with disabilities, migrants, refugees, etc. What are the kind of response to school of these closures at the national context? Well, the education landscape needs to learn to adjust, and we have seen various forms of online education and education resources being mobilized and implemented. We have heard of some already from my colleagues. However, we can see that the crisis also is amplifying the gaps in technology, the gaps in teaching models, the gaps in digital illiteracy of teachers and students, and we can see that our education systems were designed in a way for a different world. And by a paradox rare, in this midst of the crisis, the demand of non-formal and informal education and learning has surpassed that of formal education. As evidenced by the response of multiple organizations and individuals who are engaging citizens through public information campaigns, trying to urgently inform and change the behavior of people around the world, we can see an important opportunity to reposition of lifelong learning policies worldwide. What are the response at the international context? Well, in the face of these closures, international organizations have developed responses to support countries in their efforts to mitigate the immediate impact of the pandemic, particularly for more vulnerable and disadvantaged communities. UNESCO particularly urgently put in place several measures to support its member states in mitigating the effects of the coronavirus, mainly on education and in ensuring the continuity of education and learning programs. For example, through the Global Education Coalition, launched by UNESCO, is an open partnership initiative that seeks to facilitate inclusive learning opportunities for children and youth during this period of sudden and unprecedented education disruption. The coalition includes United Nations agencies, international organizations, private sector, civil society representatives engaged in advancing COVID-19 education response from around the world at global, regional, and local levels. What binds the coalition is a commitment to help countries assure the inclusive and equitable provision of distance education. The initiative have been developed in alignment with those of many other organizations, such as UNICEF, which is, for example, supporting countries to put in place contingency plans and safe learning environments, or with ILO, the International Labour Organization, which is focusing more on teaching and skills training, as well as socio-emotional support for teachers. More at the local, more at the level of the institute, which is based in Hamburg, the Institute for Lifelong Learning, which is the only UN institute that is focused on lifelong learning. We have been cities at the forefront of the crisis, and it's on this basis that UIL, through the Unesco Global Network of Learning Cities, which is a network of around 180 cities, is hosting webinar series titled UNESCO Learning Cities Respond to COVID-19. These webinars are an opportunity for cities to share successful local initiatives during the pandemic. Cities from different world regions give presentations and participate engaging through provoking debates about how best to deal with the current situation. Namely, now to mitigate its worst effects and in some way seize unexpected opportunities. I think it's a good way to see how at the local level city authorities are dealing with the crisis, and what's the response of families in many of these cities to the situation. Topics have been included in this webinar, such as migrants and refugees, health and well-being. Yesterday we had one on digital learning, among many others. Next week is going to be prisoners. So it's really trying to reflect the variety of themes that need to be addressed in this crisis. The UIL has also been hosting interview series with mayors and other representatives of UNESCO Learning Cities on their response to COVID-19, as well as blog series on how to ensure lifelong learning during COVID-19, very much working on family learning, intergenerational learning, community learning. Finally, we're also continuously working on issue notes presenting successful local initiatives on how to ensure lifelong learning during COVID-19. This covers a number of actions taken at the UNESCO Institute for Lifelong Learning, as well as some examples of actions taken in the broader UNESCO context. I'd like to simply add here, and I'll provide some examples later on, that the need to consolidate with the national education system structures that allowed non-formal and informal learning opportunities to be effectively distributed in order to continuously prepare the entire population to be ready at all times is paramount in times such as these ones. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Raul, for sharing your insights for that from UNESCO and also from Lifelong Learning. I put up there for the audience on the chat box a number of the online support pages that UNESCO's put up, which are very informative about different online distance learning solutions and what different countries are doing on their national initiatives, which is, I find it very inspirational. I think others will too. Okay, so we're going to start another quick round here, and then we're going to get to the Q&A session. So at this point, then we will start again back with Brajesh. And this time I'd like each panelist to really address that role of digital learning, how it's becoming more important concern, how it will affect current and future learning, and is this going to be with us for a long time? So they could talk about that, or they could highlight a major thing that they want to bring forth to the group for consideration of what they feel the most important thing is. And so Brajesh, we will come back to you, and Sarah, you can turn the presenter back over to Brajesh. Thank you so much.
Learning is going to become really important now. So in terms of how we look at it, this is going to be a new normal. Many countries have been planning to implement digital learning approaches to enhance learning and employment outcomes, but the pandemic has forced them to scale up such efforts at unprecedented scale. In many cases, this has been rather ad hoc due to the urgent need to respond quickly. While this has suddenly become a huge interest of governments, it has also identified many existing gaps in the education systems, including threatening to widen existing inequities. Raul mentioned about that also. This is a major concern for us. As a result, it is turning into a good opportunity for massive investments in digital learning, testing different solutions, and collecting lessons and evidence for enhancing learning for all using new generation technologies such as adaptive learning and AI-powered systems that you mentioned, Steve, at the outset. Next, opportunity to revisit the core problems with transformative new lenses. This provides a great opportunity to reimagine and redesign education and training approaches to address the learning crisis and skills mismatches. Shamal mentioned about the need to look at it more closely. No question about that. For instance, how to develop self-directed learners who are able to learn in an age of digital disruptions, growing urbanization, and unprecedented labor mobility. How to provide soft and digital skills in addition to the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. This is the kind of discussions we're having. Digital literacy skills of teachers need to be improved to transform teaching and learning. New generation technologies allow personalized learning to the grade or competency level. And now systems are moving towards competency-based learning. Even higher education is doing that. In some cases, institutions are coming up and providing training without charging tuition upfront, but they have linked with wide network of employers, so that appropriate technologies, adaptive learning powered by AI aligned with proven instructional strategies, it will be possible for teachers to assess students continuously and adapt their teaching to ensure that all students are students and teachers are learning from different sources and outside of education institutions. Home environment is a major part of this equation, where parents play an important role to assist teachers in providing help to their children. It is also important to train and guide them on how to use digital tools and platforms to ensure an effective online learning experience for the children. Then possibility of closing down schools may again happen because of, I mentioned at the beginning, new waves. And technology can help the system, education systems to track students, teachers, and to optimize digital solutions. This is very important. Blended learning is therefore a new normal. Blended learning that combines the flexibility of online learning resources and the strong interactions of the offline classrooms could become a new norm. Partnership between ADB, the EdTech industry, and development partners are required for optimal support to DMCs. Unesco has already initiated this process also. Online testing, certification, and credentials are very important. Going forward, more online options for testing and credentialing would be required. And this also requires security, safety features. Virtual internships and apprenticeships need to be developed by the corporate sector, thus as workers are continuing to work from home and students learning from home. Similar arrangements could be put in place for on-the-job training and apprenticeships. Example like IT sector is more feasible. Broad-based employment services in the digital domain is another area. Employment services, job centers with career counseling, coaching, soft skills training, placement and post-placement services and career planning are important. There are institutions like JobCred and other institutions that use again, AI system to develop the demand side of the labor market, and then match that with individual skills profile so that students are able to know, learners are able to find out where the gaps are and prepare accordingly. This is very important, and this is particularly important for lifelong learning and improving all the time. Let me end here, and then Lisa, you can complement.
Thank you so much, Brajesh. And before we get to Lisa, I just want to say that you've kind of really outlined what the educational industry needs to do and to step up, and all the things that need to be now developed and put in place. And with the support of the ADB and other projects that, you know, and governments, then hopefully this can be realized, you know, because systems can be developed, but sometimes the problem is getting them into the school's hands so that they can use them. So thank you very much for that. It was really inspiring. So Lisa, please continue on from where Brajesh, some of his thoughts, and add what are your thoughts towards this as to the future?
Thank you, Steve. So I would just like to underline what Brajesh said by explaining how this can look like in one of our ADB supported projects, namely in India. So as we notice now, digital learning has suddenly become a huge interest of governments, and the crisis has at the same time identified many existing gaps in the education systems, which of course require our attention. And for us, it's now an opportunity to really link those existing short-term approaches with the longer-term needs by looking at those upcoming initiatives, testing those different solutions, and really seeing their impact on improved learning, to then later on develop high-quality, sustainable solutions for the future. So for example, in one of our skill development projects in India, in Madhya Pradesh, we have a recently established global skills park where high quality technical skills are being trained in trades such as metal cutting, CNC. But this global skills park has now to be closed due to the pandemic. So quite suddenly, the skills park moved towards online learning. They initiated now theory classes via Zoom. They also use Siemens CNC software for training students, and they plan to also include some Udemy courses on a more advanced level. But already now, we are beginning to see some challenges that emerge. Many students of the skills park don't have laptops or desktops at home. Internet connection can be weak, so they often use their mobile phones, which then makes it difficult for them to see the content and also to get a good audio experience. The trainers, even though they're well prepared by using PowerPoint presentations or videos, they still need more capacity building to make really use of those online lessons and the different systems they're planning to use. And also, since the central part of TVET is practice and the connection to the real world of work, we also need to think about introducing in the future a more advanced edtech solutions which can be used for blended learning, to link those online theory classes that are now taking place to offline practice classes by also integrating different edtech solutions in not only classrooms but also laboratories and workshops. So we see really an opportunity for us to invest broadly in digital learning, testing those different solutions, and then collect lessons learned from projects such as the Global Skills Park in India, but also different other partner countries of ADB. Back to you, Steve.
Thanks so much, Lisa, for that. And before we move to Shamal, I'd like to ask you both, I'm getting a little bit to the Q&A, a question. So how do you think that what is happening now will affect current Asian development projects? Because you were talking about projects in India, and probably a number of us are aware, you have projects in India. ADB always designs and develops projects closely with the governments, you know, and the vision before is now maybe the, as you're saying, the vision afterwards. This is a question for Rajesh. So how will this affect projects moving forward? Will they change focus? And I would imagine future projects may look quite a bit different from existing models. Maybe you comment on that for just a little bit. Thank you.
Yeah, that's a very good question and a very practical one. Basically, if we look at what the problems have been, Tibet is what we call undermanaged, fragmented, and also under-resourced. And so how do we take this opportunity to look at some of the gaps? And this is where the soft skills and digital skills become very important. Tibet image has been a very big problem. And what we see is that unless the employability improves, unless the students' foundational skills improve, it is very difficult to take it forward and make it attractive. And we can learn lessons from countries like Singapore, which have really projected the quality and also environment of teaching and learning. So drawing on that, we have to look at learning metrics, the competencies, so that students get good foundational skills also and soft skills that will help them to move up the career path. And this is where teachers also become important, which I'm going to talk about. And given the current crisis, governments and stakeholders are looking forward to complementary solutions. And these digital things, solutions we're talking about are only means, and we should not take them as magic bullets, but complementary, and we have to build evidence on that. So that's where we see that the discourse is going to be at a next level of practicality and complementarity.
Very good, very interesting. And, you know, I have to say, again, thank you so much for, you know, doing this dialogue with Worlddidac, because this is quite a first in this way. We're all in this together, and we need to look for those solutions. And you as the ADB, you know, your teams need to know what's possible in order to design and what you're going to, you know, encourage governments to do. So this is really, really practical, I think, to have this type of dialogue here, particularly at this level. Although it's a very small group, it's quite influential for what we all do. Okay, Dr. Shamal, over to you now. So let's hear your second round of thoughts here. Very much. Thank you so much.
Yeah. Thank you, Steve, for a wonderful, you know, dialogue that is going on between the multi-stakeholders, providers, companies, and also the, you know, development banks. So I had some thinking on the. I like to concentrate on the digital learning and where we have to work together in more, I will say, in a convergent way. One thing I like to say that no doubt COVID-19 will be the catalyst for educational transformation into the digital age. If you read the message in the world, one message is very clear and loud. Distance education, online learning, blended learning will be the new normal. Whatever is the country, they are forced to adopt in different. So I have uttered in all in 3-in-1, distance learning, online learning, and also I'm talking about blended learning. Now the question of degree of blendedness will largely be depend on institutional capacities, institutional readiness. There are 3 factors when we look this readiness, and they should work in a harmony. The first one, hardware and connectivity. I will give top priority on connectivity, and I will request ADB and Brajesh, without any hesitation, without any rethinking, this is the central issue that is needed now. I have given the statistics worldwide. The home environment is miserable. 50% do not have computers. 49% has no internet connection. You are talking of online learning. You are talking of a digital world with this. In Africa, it is 90. Although ADB is not under Africa, I'm talking about not only ADB, African Development Bank, World Bank, everybody has to give this important in the highest one. So hardware, we have to see small, low-cost computers. Regarding smartphone, different gadgets, we have to look into that. So this is one. So connectivity, number one. The second is the software. Sometimes people get puzzled, and I am in this field almost 30 years now, 30, 35 years on education technology working. We get puzzled. And now different people come with different solutions. Give a fantastic, proprietary software and working so easily, user-friendly, but it doesn't work with different systems. So I think in the software, we have to be very clear, open educational platform, open educational resources should be the priority. Recently, I had a discussion with the director of European Commission, and they have noted there is a huge shortage of educational resources, even in Europe. Forget about Asia, Africa, and Latin America in Tibet. So that needs to be highlighted. We need to think out of box, give the teacher a challenging task. Those who complete open educational resources, give them reward, give them not only seminar and workshop, the time is needed to action, and that it has need to be given the top priority. The third one is the humanware. We call it, capacity of the teacher will be critical concern. If you ask me a single factor, why online learning has not taken that, Steve, you are working in this field for so long, how much it is a trouble. You see that you have a good workshop and seminar and that's their end. It doesn't take off because capacity development of the teachers is the critical parameter, and we have not given adequate, emphasis on that. For that reason, I have 3 recipes. You can say just for loud thinking. Number one, among you, the companies, some of you have a brilliant idea and very good sophisticated mission. But I'm requesting you, please change your paradigm. Not start what you have, start where we are. I think the country, it's a golden opportunity for all of you, I'm telling you, because all the country, all the institutions, school, college, technical college, university are really, really working hard to do something in a very meaningful way. You have to give them guidance. How distance education and technology combined blended solution can come in a low cost way. You cannot say them that let's start with LMS and install that. You can't. You have to go with the low cost, low tech. You have to go no tech to low tech to high tech, and you can leapfrog. But ultimately, take steps from where we are. So that's why I have idea of 3 flagship programs. I told this one to Unesco, European Commission, and everywhere where they are requesting me in the webinar or others. Number 1 flagship will be on connectivity. So ITU Global Partnership has been launched to ensure the connectivity, particularly in Africa and developing countries. Number 2, a flagship for Tibet teachers. Massive Tibet teachers capacity building. That will ensure finally our success and the roadmap. The third, I will say, is the gender issue. I think we have to know there are a lot of divide. There is a digital divide. There is a further gender divide, and it will be compounded. So with all this thing, I suggest that we can say a plethora of solution, and finally we do nothing. That's not the way we should do that. There are thousands of problems, but let's identify priority problem and concentrate all the multi-stakeholder in whatever way we can contribute and reach the goal. And that's the things. 2 challenges I think still remain on education, apart from this system challenge. Number one is the simulator. As you know, that TVET is not just theory, it is practical skill. So without feeling a machine, you can't be you cannot be a skilled person. The question is, you can come up with this virtual simulator and 3D simulators. There's a lot is coming up. I like to see more practical approach on that, which can really help, because this is a one ongoing debate. The second debate is how effective adaptive learning should be using AI. Without asking question, you can have the person where they are, what their tacit and explicit knowledge can change your learning style, and it become embedded interactivity, which is called 7 level of interactivity that can be imposed. This is more of an academic challenge, I'm telling you, but that is the reality, because good teacher always challenge the online education on that front, but they sometimes do not know much has been progress. I like to stop here, and I like to say that these we have to really work together to find the solutions.
Very good. Thank you so much. You've touched upon a number of really, really key areas, and I love your practical solutions of what we have to get onto in terms of development and connectivity, and these are really challenges. I know both you and I and all of us would love to see that happen, and I think we should continue the dialogue on this. You also touched upon the issues of vocational training, and I think after after Raul, we may come back to this, and I think Brajesh also will have some comments, as we have. I see most of the questions are getting towards this area that we have. So thank you so much, Dr. Shamal. So Raul, maybe you could share a few more words with us then, and then we'll get to just one or two Q&A questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. We can see that there have been positive trends in using technology to reach out to children, youth, adults in the different needs. As we know, the provision of TVET, including work-based learning in the current context, depends on the digital skills of both training and learners, but the quality is an issue. And when it comes to distance learning, there is a digital skill gap among workers and TVET learners. Something has been confirmed already by the Unesco analysis of gaps in access to technology. So this will require strong cooperation among all actors involved in shaping education and training policies. This will specifically include paying an increased attention to support for and the delivery of vocational education and training, including practical training in most countries, as well as increasing attention for countries that are advancing the reflection on final examinations and certification. It's important to make sure that supporting teachers and training is provided through dedicated platforms and through peer support at providers levels, as well as through the tutoring programs delivered centered by national authorities. In fact, I think that this disruption of the operational of the system, of the education system, will leave important lessons on how to adopt new approaches to develop more open and flexible national education systems in the future. However, the search for greater openness and flexibility will not be without its own challenges. We have heard of some of those. But since the distance education has been used in recent weeks, it requires countries to have digitally literate teachers and students, a functional and quality technological infrastructure, specific teaching models, and experience that allow a rapid transit to widespread use. So it's not natural. I think it's going to take time, the learning process. I would like to say that the complexity and uncertainty were experienced about how we'll take up our daily lives and world will be transformed into demands for having population that are adaptable, resilient, open to change, and to constant learning. We need to start thinking on learning in different dimensions: healthcare, citizen education, information literacy, social awareness, cooperation and tolerance, process of requalification for employment, new practices of coexistence, and the adoption of new technologies, among others, will constitute an array of demands to be met in the new political and economic environments that we will face. For me, there are many important aspects to raise, and they have been raised during the webinar, but to focus on mainly on, or to stress two of them. One is the relevance of not to continue exacerbating already the existing inequalities in education. To keep in mind, of course, the no one to left behind, and I'm talking about girls and women, disadvantaged groups, those remote learning opportunities without connectivity, and really planning for learning recovery when open schools. The second point is that the crisis has also reminded us of the need to consolidate within the national education system structures that allow non-formal and informal learning opportunities to be effectively distributed in order to continuously prepare the entire population to be ready, to know what to do at all times. This form of learning is paramount in times of such as this, with the multiple efforts inside and outside governments to quickly equip citizens with sufficient knowledge and information to respond to the health crisis, and maintain healthy populations by attempting to flatten the curve of the spreading of the virus. So really, in order to change habits, we need to bring very strong the lifelong learning concept. Education and lifelong learning for all can positively change the behavior of population. It's the only through changing our habits that can partially recover the daily life that was disrupted. And among the main lessons of the crisis, we will probably find that it is necessary to rethink how we create learning opportunities for all people, so that we strengthen really democratic and global citizenship, increase employability, and have more democratic, productive, resilient, and adaptable communities. I'll stop it here and wait for questions. Thank you.
Raul?
Yes.
Thank you very much. So, okay, we've completed our rounds of discussions, things like this. I know we're running a little bit late, but I'd like to get on at least to one issue before we leave. I want to thank everybody's patience for staying online with us here during the session, but this is a very in-depth, very complex issue, and our time is relatively short to do this. But I think that we have achieved a very interesting communication about the willingness and getting everyone to work together to solve these problems. And certainly at this time, in education, we all agree that the education sector has been one of the slowest of human activity to change from the transformation or the effects of transformation or transforming from or using technology. Society and social structure is transforming a lot, with social platforms and all this sort of stuff. Industries, the medical industry, manufacturing is transformed a lot, but less so in education. So the question that's to us, and maybe to have just a few thoughts from each of you about this, is that we have 3 or 4 questions, the majority of questions actually from the technical side, from the TVET area, and since quite a few of us work in this area, I think it's a good question for the panel, is how can we do more into go into practical learning and to do hands-on learning. When TVET is this question, and Rajesh, you brought this up, we actually should be moving towards blended learning. Is probably the ultimate model that we need to go for technical education. And but at this time, how do you do it virtually? and can it be done virtually? I'd like your thoughts, each of you, on this. Just very brief, maybe one or 2 minutes, and then we'll wind this up. So maybe Rajesh, back to you about this issue.
Yeah, sure. I also notice in the comments that this digital platform or online learning is not necessarily the panacea. So that is very important. What we're talking about is the current crisis. And then once we get out of that, then the new normal will be different. So if we are just talking about the current crisis, we have a big challenge because in Tibet, practical hands-on, as you mentioned, training is difficult. But I think with some level of cooperation among different stakeholders, certain things may still be done. Like take, Steve, you can also share your own experience. You have been trying to do certain things online, but it has limitations. So what I'm saying is basically this blended learning is the ultimate, and there Bloom's taxonomy, some of us or most of us are familiar with that. So higher order thinking, non-routine thinking is what is becoming very important. And that's where I think human capacity becomes really important. So how do we combine foundational basic skills before coming to class? So before the actual group meeting and before that, how do students prepare? And then when they come, how do they sort of build on that to start thinking about experiential learning, about practical learning? I think these are the principles we have to look at, and that will require strong partnership right from the outset. Currently, many Tibet providers are detached in developing countries, and that's the kind of challenge we're trying to address in close cooperation with government and training and the employers. So I'll stop there.
Very good. Thank you, Brajesh. Thanks for that. And that is very insightful. And I will share a few things just as winding up here that I think would be very interesting for the group. So because this is a topic certainly close to my heart too. Lisa, how about you? A final few words.
Yes, Steve, I would also like to add on what Brajesh said. So if we look at online learning, which can take place at home even before students move into Tibet institutes, we should also not forget the actual learning in the classrooms, in the laboratories, in the workshops, and think about how we can integrate edtech solutions in the more practical part of the training. And I think there, the collaboration with the industry, with the future employers is really important, because we see many international companies, they are already moving towards becoming smart factories, Industry 4.0. They're having cyber physical systems, sensors they're working with. So if we look at these more higher level skills, and if we want to prepare the students for the work in such factories, we also need to look at those technologies and need to integrate them into the learning in the Tibet Institute. But that requires a close collaboration with the industry partners.
Very good. Well said. And I hope that we will get a closer cooperation with industry, and that's actually a role for Worlddidac to do. Why we're having this dialogue, because it's hard to start that dialogue that leads to that collaboration, particularly in the past. This is one thing I hope that can change. Governments have been wary about working too closely with private industry for a variety of reasons that we're probably all aware of. But it requires that, because if this is the group that's developing solutions for you, you need to communicate with them and to express that willingness and openness so that they can be designed to meet those needs mutually. And I think all of us in the industry really would welcome that type of closer collaboration so that we could, everything functions better. So Dr. Shamal, thank you, Lisa. Thanks so much. Dr. Shamal, maybe a few words from you, sir.
Adding your, that vocational skill is basically practice-based. I think there is no two mind on doubt about that. Basically, if you have a knowledge and attitude, this can be transferred in a different blended learning way. But when it comes to the skill transfer, the direct hands-on practice with real machine is necessary. This is not just for COVID. Before the COVID, this has been debated. And that's why there are a lot of work has been done in that direction, which now modern virtual simulator has come. I have seen such when I was one of the Univox Center in Basque region. You will be amazed to see how they are practicing now on the virtual simulator. The reason they are using is that they are also saying practice of the real machine is necessary, but machine is very costly. And you cannot do unnecessary time in a sense. When you have to come to the machine with preparedness, and that can be done by using this virtual simulator, virtual reality concept, and with Lisa was telling about cyber physical space, like 360-degree, angle. You can teach the whole thing in a detailed way, but that cannot replace practice with real machine. So if anybody advocate that idea, I beg to differ on that. In fact, I will say that machine is the ultimate, and we have to find out. There's a two-way of that one. One is the company, where we have this facility can be done. And it is also true, this situation will not be continued for lifelong. So somehow the normalcy will come, and then you can have to have this balance. But blended learning is a different connotation where asynchronous learning and synchronous learning need to be combined. Don't confuse with COVID is the blended learning. Blended learning pedagogically is a sound concept, because synchronization all the time, coming in a fixed time, fixed place, fixed ways is not possible. This is the world of asynchronous communication, has to be combined with face-to-face, minimize the face-to-face, give more critical thinking, more innovative thinking part on that. So that's my take on it. On a conclusion, I will say that COVID-19 has exposed two things. Number one, there's a large digital gap in how to use technology. There's a learning we have to do. We don't have to come with a prescription. Let's go to the country, see their difficulties, try to come up with a solution that helps them from one stage to another. So that's in terms of hardware, in terms of connectivity, in terms of humanware. So my single word will be, it is a great challenge. At the same time, it is a great, great opportunity. In a lifetime, I have never seen just a school's teachers approaching me that, Dr. Majumdar, can you help us? We don't know how to combine Zoom with the WhatsApp, how we can do that. Never they thought that they will be compelled to do this kind of things suddenly. So please appreciate, teachers are in a huge, huge difficulties. And we as a technologists, those who are well known, our responsibility is to come up with the solution to give this opportunity a much more better way. My simple thing, are we prepared for this? Let's do together.
Thank you very much for that. And that was very interesting, the share for that. And I hope that we can accomplish that together. Raul, one more round for you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Well, I think that my colleagues already went into the important topics. I was just thinking on how to deal with the informal economy in so many countries. Just thinking in Latin America, many countries, 60% of the population is in the informal economy. And it's interesting that they are finding or trying to find ways of improve their competences in this crisis. So that comes like a highlight really the relevance of reskilling and rethinking how to organize the economy in different way. I also think that that many countries, I mean, are not having the same possibilities as we can see clear in Singapore, in Republic of Korea, where we can have these laboratories that are supporting the knowledge, the learning processes of learners. And we can see even that systems that are very well structured, such as the dual system in Germany, and it's now trying to be implemented in many other countries, is not able to move forward because, of course, the partnership is not strengthening enough between the government and the industry and the schools. So I think that it's also putting this COVID-19 is also putting this crisis in a very clear way, that if we don't start structuring and really reinforcing the partnership among and to build trust among the different partners, it will be very difficult to move on this, because of course we are kind of paralyzed when it comes to have a more practical experience. And for the time being, this will not be able to happen. So I think it's time, in a way, to learn that we need to reinforce our partnership with all the sectors in society. I will stop it here.
Thank you very much, Raul. Thanks so much for that. So we're coming towards the end of this this webinar. It's run on for quite a bit longer, but it's been so fascinating. I'd just like to leave with a few more words and add just onto this topic a little bit. Sarah, if you could turn the presentation moderator back over to me, because I want to share my screen. Let's see if I can do that. And okay, thank you. Okay, here we go. This is something very useful, I think, for just the last part of this conversation. This is something that very simple model, but it says a lot about what we may be moving towards in the TVET area for virtual learning and hands-on. So I think everyone is exactly right that we have to look at a blended system. We cannot just look for a digital solution, but we have to look for also the practical and the hands-on. And actually, it is a combination of these things. The digital learning is getting more and more powerful, and it can take over a lot of the theory. It can take over a lot of the presentations. It could even perhaps flip the classroom to do this outside the school, so that the student comes and if he arrives in the school, he can become better prepared to actually do the hands-on, take less time to do the hands-on. If this is done the right way, actually could increase the throughput in schools. But this model, doing this, I think, can elevate the level of learning that we're doing. And if more and more companies act and create more resources in this area, this will help it happen. You know, we in our small way at LabTech, we work in this field, and we develop these models trying to achieve a good balance towards this. And, you know, but it takes everybody, I think, to work together to create this. So we're looking at new types of pedagogy, and I think that we're moving from an andragogy for pedagogy to an andragogy to heutagogy is now where we are going towards self-directed, self-motivated learning in this. You know, keeping this in mind is important. We at LabTech, we set this as a goal at 50% to achieve this. And a few years ago, I had a conversation with the chief education architect from Intel, and asking him what he thought the future would be. And I think, as one of our learners, or one of our presenters has said, the panelists, I think, Shamal, it was you, this area, wherever it is, it's going to increase. As more resources come here, this line will be able to be pushed farther and farther, but still we will have that hands-on. But it may look very different than what it is in schools today. So we would concentrate just on the physical aspects of what the student needs to master his skills. So as this becomes more powerful, this becomes more focused, and perhaps can be done in a lesser period of time. So I think sharing these models is good. And I'd like to also share one thing that in our small way that LabTech, we've been rushing to put our virtual learning, virtual TVET online. Prior to this, we only had it offline because the files are so large. We use game-based learning and interactive learning and some of these simulations, Shamal, that you talked about that we're doing here. It could only be used offline, but we're getting it online. And so now there is, this is just launched today, actually. Today, this is up. You can go to labtech-academy.com and see these simulations and things that we're doing here. And this is still early days for this, but we're allowing students and teachers to use this free of charge for the time being. We've set an initial period of 30 days. We're probably going to extend that. This is our assistance during COVID-19, and can provide some inspiration, I think, to others. And this is part of Worlddidac. There are a number of companies from Worlddidac that are doing this, and we'll be highlighting this in later on to everybody for that. So I would like to remind people that the next webinar will be May 14th, and the topic will be Education Business Enablers during the COVID-19 era, and about social selling, promotions, and business ecosystems. And finally, I'd like to really thank all of our presenters, Brajesh Pant, Lisa Marie, Dr. Shamal, Raul. Thank you so much for coming together, helping us for this, and your words and your suggestions are very inspirational, and I hope that this starts a more in-depth dialogue for public-private sector partnerships and everything over the next period of time. So